Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about the new TikTok world and and America's future in the light of America's future, specifically in the light of the 2022 war in Europe. Okay, all right. So let's talk about the new TikTok world. It's really important. The last week I've done nothing but think about tanks. Like it's just in my head, right? Um, so basically, I think understanding the modern world, you have to understand tanks. It is the divider line. We didn't know it until we saw it. We see it now. We see what's happening in the 2022 war in Europe. Vladimir Putin invades Ukraine, and you have tanks shooting at tanks in Europe. That hasn't happened since World War II. Period. Right? There might have been a couple flashes, but generally that at the level we're seeing right now, it really hasn't happened, right? So, extended, protracted, actually important tank battles, right? All right. So let's talk this through. So first of all, TikTok, right? Um, tank impoverished countries who have never built a tank or never surplused tanks. They build a few, but they don't sell their extras and they don't give them away like Christmas gifts, right? And then tank originating countries. There's only 4 tank originating countries in the entire world. Just 4, right? It's Russia. It's it is Russia. It is Germany, and it is the United States of America and one other country. And they make tanks at such like at numbers so high, so frequently, and so much vigor that they surplus them. They literally just gift them out to other countries and sell them. So the tank originating countries. There's only 4 of them in the whole world, right? And here's what I want to talk about today. These countries, these 4 countries, actually are the only countries. This is my supposition. This is my supposition. All right, come at me in the comments. All right, my supposition is that these 4 countries are the only countries in the world that actually have the ability to wage war today, and that every other skirmish that they actually have the ability to wage war. And one more thing, they can permission war. Okay, I think it's very important for us to going forward to know what a war is, right? And the reason why is why is it important to know what a war is, right? Well, Vladimir Putin at the beginning of this, and right now still, right? He was like, this is a special military operation, right? And that's a real thing. Like, if you could do something in a weekend, that's not a war, right? Like you got some kinetic activity, maybe some stuff happens. That's a military operation. It's really a skirmish, right? We have skirmishes, and we have international skirmishes, and we have wars, right? And we need to stop confusing these, and we need to stop slapping the label of war on every time there's an international skirmish, right? And so basically, if whatever's happening in your country, if tanks aren't shooting tanks, if there aren't 2 sides that have tanks and they're shooting each other, you're in an international skirmish. That's not really a real war. Okay, it's just not, right. Like, because one of those countries, right, because either they ran out of tanks or they never built tanks, right, they don't really have the ability to wage war, right. And there's a lot of countries now who really, now that we see what actual war looks like, right, in modern day, right, there's a ton of countries that they have a performative gesturing military, right? These four nations I just talked about, they're like, we could defeat you in a weekend, it'd be a hobby day, right? Whatever, right? And that's how the world is divided now, right? So these 4 countries, Russia, Germany, and the United States of America, they're the only countries in the world who can actually wage war. Oh, and one other country. They're the only countries in the world who can actually wage war or permission a war. And that's actually what's happening right now in Ukraine, right? Basically, Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine. Ukraine is an actual, stones to the wall, real country, right, with real tanks, right, that they made, right, and their tanks are shooting other tanks, and they're in the middle of a war, right. But because Ukraine is a tank dabbler country, they made a few tanks, but they don't surplus tanks out of Ukraine, right? The war is not actually Ukraine's war. It is permissioned by those 4 tank originating countries. It's being permissioned right now by Germany, Russia. They're very much permissioning it, and the United States of America. They're like, we're going to allow this war to happen. Right? And that, I think this is really different. Like, we didn't really understand this, that there's really only 4 countries on the planet that can actually wage war, and that whenever there is a war that they're not in directly, right? That the other country, the other groupings, the other countries in the 4 tank originating countries, they, the ones who surplus, right? They surplus tanks. That's the real deal. Does your country surplus tanks? Thanks, lemonade stand. We don't really need your advice on what we should do. You don't surplus tanks. Your country doesn't matter, right? The big boys are, the big girls are having a conversation here. Go over and, we'll tell you when our talk is done, right? Like, that's where we're at now, right? And I think it's really helpful to understand what the actual power bases are, and the rest of these countries really don't matter when it comes to military decisions, right? Military decisions in the world today are made by 4 countries: Germany, Russia, U.S., and 1 other country, and that is it. That is it. Everything else is skirmishes, wars. So if those 4 countries, if they have tanks, if any of those 4 countries have tanks on both sides of this country's tank, if any tank originating countries have tanks shooting at each other, you got a real problem then. You got a real problem. Everything else is a lighter problem, right? Like, is a much lower scale problem, right? And the reality is what's happening right now, the 2022 war in Europe. Vladimir Putin invades Ukraine. Ukraine fights back vehemently, makes sure it's not a military action, a military operation, make sure it's a real war, because there are tanks shooting at tanks over an extended period of time, right? That is it's actually a permissioned war. It's a war that's being permissioned by Russia and Germany and the United States. They're like, okay, we see what's happening at school. You guys, play on, right? Like, it's that. This is the actual shape of the world, right? And this took me a little while to get to this, to understand this, right? There's a lot happening. There's a lot of complexity going on, right? And this is the real deal. This is how the world actually rolls right now, right? In my humble opinion, what do you think? Do you think I'm right? You think I got it covered? Right? That TikTok is the actual new shape of the world. And understanding the new definition of TikTok is the way to go. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.